Chapter 11. How to Use Your Sixth Sense. Today, the existence of a sixth sense is well recognized. Supersensory ability has been recorded through the centuries, but only recently under laboratory conditions. Now, its existence is finally and irrevocably proved. Under sixth sense may be lumped all paranormal phenomena such as thought transference, clairvoyance, psychokinesis, which in parapsychology are called ESP, extrasensory perception. Intuitive understanding of circumstances comes through the use of the sixth sense, and its range and scope are vastly greater than the other five. The dimly seen world. The physical sensory organs reveal to us the barest indication of what actually is encountered in the material world. They record vibrations. Each sense records a tiny segment of the total spectrum of vibrations. The recording of all five senses is only an infinitesimal part of that total spectrum. 1,000,000 times more remains untold about each object we encounter than is ever revealed to us by our physical senses. We move about in a world that we obtain only the dimmest impression of. Objects that we regard as solid are not solid at all, are merely enclosures of higher vibrations, and everything exists in a constant state of movement and flux. Form is merely the imprisonment of movement within dimension, and in the final analysis all things are far more mental than physical. Now that physical science has been able to reduce the smallest bit of matter to nothingness, has found basic substance to be energy or intelligence, even the most materialistic of researchers has been forced to the inevitable conclusion that all things are basically ideas, that they are held in form as concepts in some universal intelligence. It is through this universal intelligence that we discover the sixth sense, that we arrive at spiritual enlightenment. It is the immersion of ego in this intelligence that provides salvation for the individual man, allows him to live his life in a state of attunement and harmony. The psychological act of shocking off the little self and attaining to a larger self is what the great mystics speak of when they record their arrival at the moment of truth. There is a vast and great mind that is responsible for the construction of the universe, that is in a very real sense the universe itself, and this infinite and eternal intelligence creates only from its own substance, and everything which it creates is inherently itself, not something different, except through the limitation imposed upon it by its becoming partial and incomplete. Everything in creation is a manifestation of the one mind and intelligence that underlies all. Each man, therefore, has within him a supermind, which is free of limitation and restriction, and this mind, working beneath the level of conscious intelligence, is capable of absolute and truthful guidance in all things because it understands and perceives. Moments of illumination. Universal mind is a manifestation of the secret self, of that divine will that inexorably leads mankind upon the path of evolution. The surface mind and ego are products of the five senses, of that knowledge that a man acquires during the period of his lifetime, and since they are the results of limited knowledge and partial experience, they are the poorest vehicles for the conduct of action. Absolute effectiveness comes to the man who immerses his ego in universal mind and allows the secret self to guide him. His psychological position is that of a listener. His inner mind and heart become attuned to a wider consciousness a greater sense of being, impressions, knowledge, and intuitive urgings come to him from out of this source with an authority greater than anything received through his sensory organs. Ever and anon, the trumpet sounds from the hid battlements of eternity, wrote Francis Thompson. And to each of us, as he goes through life, a moment comes, however fleeting, when a crack appears in the hard wall of consciousness, and we see through briefly into regions of eternal light and infinite knowledge, and in that moment, we truly are possessed of a sixth sense. Something paranormal happens, some example of intuitive knowledge. We read the thoughts of others, or see at a distance, or understand coming events. Such an experience leaves us shaken. Our absorption in the material world is forgotten for the moment. We begin to see the astounding possibilities of mind and consciousness. We become convinced that when we deal with material things, we deal with results, not causes. We know that all causes exist in mind. We begin to perceive infinite possibilities, vast scopes, subtle nuances that have been hidden from us by our limited consciousness. Intuition and reason. Intuition is much more reliable than reason, for reason charts its course with limited access to facts, while intuition has at its fingertips all the knowledge that has ever existed, that ever will exist. Using the sixth sense, however, is not such a simple matter as trusting one's life to one's feelings. It is very easy to fall into the trap of being guided by the emotions, under the misapprehension that emotions are intuitive feelings. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Emotion is a wild horse running away with the inhabitant in the body, and he who is ruled by emotion is in the grip of something worse than limited knowledge. He is the blind tool of egoistic fears, hates, envies. Such a life is an idiot's tale without design. Charles Steinmetz of the General Electric Company wrote, "Someday, people will learn that material things will not bring happiness and are of little use in making men and women creative and powerful. When this day comes, then the scientists of the world will turn their laboratories to the study of God and prayer and the spiritual forces which as yet have hardly been scratched. When this day comes, the world will see more advancement in one generation than it has seen in the past 4 years. Reason enables us to deal effectively with our immediate surroundings, but only within the scope of the information available to the 5 senses. Reason tells us we may go coatless on a sunny day, but the storm that is gathering over the horizon is outside the scope of reason, and when it rains in the late afternoon, reason has been wrong. The wider consciousness in the depths of the individual must be trusted before his actions can be guided with a knowledge of all factors. Reason is a tool and logic is an effective method of thinking, but each is only a means and no more reliable than the information fed into it. Logic and science. To recognize that there is a mind within us that knows the answers to all our problems is the first step to acquiring the use of the infallible sixth sense. It is not necessary to find a solution in the material world. In point of actual fact, the solution can never be found there. The secret lies within ourselves, and we need to go no farther than our very room to find each answer. There is tremendous comfort in discovering within oneself an infinite and eternal mind that holds the answer to each problem, to realize that the solution to each perplexing situation may be found simply by searching one's soul. But if a man be sufficiently out of joint with life, he may find it extremely difficult to commune with his inner and deeper nature, may even become neurotic through having severed psychic ties with his originator. When he looks into the reaches of his soul, Those trackless corridors stretch toward infinity and appall him with their emptiness. He is frightened, seeks to return to the uneasy security of his material existence. It takes great courage to look upon the many faces of the secret self. The divine does not reside alone in beauty, comfort, love and harmony, but is equally resident in ugliness, hardship, hate and discord. The secret self attains its purpose in all areas of endeavour by the conflict of opposites. And before we are able to live as mature human beings, we must accept all sides of life as being part of an absolute sure and perfect plan for working out for the purposes of the divine. God's sense. The sixth sense is a God sense, an identification, however monetary, with the secret self, which enables the individual in that instant to perceive future, past and present in one instantaneous tableau, to contain all space and time within the confines of his own consciousness. Such awareness, if constantly possessed, would make all one's actions infallible, and the purpose of evolution must lie in just such an end as this. The beginnings of such a development are already perceivable in the lives of many men. A new approach, a new concept is necessary before investigation of the paranormal will yield results. The methods of science have not yet demonstrated that they are adaptable to the study of a world what is invisible. By means of the microscope and the telescope, science has extended its vision enormously. But in the realm of the microcosm, it disintegrated the atom and found nothing left. And in the world of the macrocosm, it detected distant galaxies moving away at the speed of light into space that shouldn't exist. Ultimately, all investigations of matter have a common meeting ground, which is the disappearance of individuality into unity, into a world where space and time and separateness do not exist, and this world is not capable of representation by objects or material things, but is primarily mental and not subject to the probing of physical instruments. Investigations in the field of parapsychology have now proved that it is possible for one mind to communicate with another without any known organic means, and this has been labelled telepathy. It has also been proved that the human mind can attain to knowledge of coming events, and this has been labelled precognition. It has been proved that the human mind can see at a distance, and this has been labelled clairvoyance. It has been proved that the human mind can influence the behaviour of objects, and this has been labelled psychokinesis. All these powers of the mind, however dimly discerned or barely understood, when lumped together indicate the existence of an absolutely unexplored area of vast and almost unimaginable possibilities that one day must liberate man from his bondage to the flesh. Moreover, there is indicated a coming revolution in the basic concepts of life. The sea of consciousness. Science has always investigated a world of multiplicity, attempting to establish physical relationships between one thing and another. Man, the animal, exists in a world of action and reaction, but man, the mental being, exists in a world that appears to be without division, without space and time, for inherent in his mental makeup is the ability to transcend these. No enlightened mind can have any quarrel with the investigations of Dr. J.B. Rhine and S.G. Soule in the field of parapsychology, and from their results the only possible conclusion is this: there are not many individual minds in the world at all, but only one mind, and this mind is infinite and eternal, and is the sustaining source of each of us, is in its truest essence all of each of us, just as each of us in truest essence is all of it. Now if each man exists in a sea of consciousness, and the consciousness in him is in everything else and in all other men, it then becomes possible to understand what we are dealing with when we deal with extrasensory perception. It has been stated that a man's intelligence is like an iceberg, 1/3 of it appearing upon the surface, 2/3 existing below. But parapsychology reveals the relationship between conscious and subconscious intelligence to be 1 part to 1,000,000. Moreover, universal subconscious mind exhibits no necessity for being educated during the lifetime of the individual. It provides eternal and infinite guidance because it has existed since the beginning of time. All knowledge is contained within it, and that very small taught intelligence acquired by conscious mind is the tiniest light compared to the illumination known when the individual life has been turned over to the guidance of the secret self. 1,000 times more awareness is obtained by the person through enlightened use of universal mind than through efforts in the world of material things. Once the secret self has been fully exposed to mankind, education, which today takes 16 years of a person's life, will be accomplished in weeks, even days. When the powerful and penetrating aspects of universal mind becomes common enough knowledge to be taught at our schools, such buildings and bridges as now are constructed in 6 months will rise overnight. There is no such thing as a particle of matter that is not possessed of conscious intelligence, however low, however restricted by the form in which it finds itself. All things exist by grace of the secret self, which is innate in each, has become each as part of an overall plan, and the urge to self-knowledge that exists within the heart of each creature is that impulsion to find impartiality, that same sense of self-awareness and expressive joy that it knew in its complete and whole state. To develop the use of the sixth sense is to learn to use universal mind, to cease living in the separate egoistic nature and to turn over the whole life to a wider and more encompassing awareness than is possible to the surface self. Steps to spiritual awakening. The consistent use of the sixth sense depends upon spiritual awakening, depends upon a man recognizing the spiritual bond that unites him with all others, with all things. Removing the focus of his consciousness from the surface self, he thereby attains to a state of widened awareness that emanates directly from his identification with the one mind and one life that is the true inhabitant in all bodies. When a man reaches this state of illumination, a new world opens up for his exploration. Physical effects take on secondary significance. He sees that things originate on an invisible plane, that all causes are mental, proceed out of ideas, out of visualizations. He begins to see that material things are not really solid facts at all, but only partially revealed manifestations of conceptions held in mind. Now he is able to perceive the secret of acting mentally, of altering things by altering the idea that exists within them. He begins to see that this altering is possible through complete identification of himself with the thing, that once this widened consciousness is achieved, he can change the thing merely by changing his idea of it, because the same mind is in him as is in the thing. Nothing is impossible to the man whose consciousness breaks out of the bonds of the ego. Once he shakes off surface self, there is revealed to him a world that is bounded only by eternity and infinity. He can become anything he desires, can accomplish anything he will, for in a very real sense all events and things have their existence in him. To achieve this state of spiritual awakening is the goal. To arrive at this state of joy and bliss and complete effectuality is beyond doubt the most worthwhile and rewarding culmination of life. Steps by which spiritual enlightenment is achieved are the steps by which the sixth sense is brought under dominion, and they are 4. These steps infallibly produce spiritual enlightenment, and to him who puts them into practice is brought not only the sixth sense, but an expanded consciousness that allows him to live his life joyfully and effectively. The 4 steps are: number 1, consecration; number 2, surrender; number 3, sacrifice; and number 4, love. So number 1, consecration, means the focusing of the total mental and spiritual efforts of the individual on discovery of the secret self. Number 2, surrender, means a wholehearted giving over of all action and goals to the divine. Number 3, sacrifice, means continual and deliberate subjugation of ego to the will and purposes of the secret self. And number 4, love, means yearning for unity, longing to return to a state of wholeness and oneness. These 4 sacramental steps, if performed unceasingly, are bound to develop that wider consciousness in which the sixth sense becomes an integral part of the life. The first step taken, all others will follow. With the mind and being dedicated to a search for wider consciousness, the life inevitably will be transformed. A sense of intimacy will come into the consciousness, and the person will find resource by which he is able to give over his goals and aspirations to the divine. Man is made of magic. Once this psychological divestment of the ego has taken place, illumination is near. Now it becomes second nature to practice a sacrifice by which the ego is kept in subjugation. Little egoistic desires are daily given up in favour of that one encompassing search for unity that is now the total consecration of the individual. The ego does not cease to exist, far from it. In some areas it appears as vigorous as before, but now it recognizes that it is only a tool, not originator, not captain or master, and it performs its tasks, goes about its work under the impulsion of and following the guidance of a will and a power totally beyond and inexpressibly more powerful than itself. There comes to the individual an experience of the unity from which he has sprung, an experiential return to a source of absolute bliss and joy and power. He enters the secret self enters him. This mutual penetration, this merging, is the union known as love, and when this takes place in the consciousness of the individual, his emergence as an enlightened and effective man begins. Now he realizes that man is not bone and blood and flesh or even brain, but is constructed of invisible essences that can only be called magic. Jean Gebster wrote, telepathy, trance, precognition, telekinesis, levitations, dual personality, and many other paranormal phenomena are rooted in the magic structure of man. So-called paranormal phenomena are not at all paranormal, but fundamentally natural. Without certain telepathic powers, or the power of precognition, without sleep and light, intuitioning, not one of us could live another day. And all of these powers arise from the magic structure of our consciousness. The effective use of the sixth sense is attained by the man who comes to the realization of the essential magic of human consciousness. He does not give his allegiance to the world of material things, but to a world of ideas and concepts and thoughts, which he perceives pre-exists and preordains the material world. Perceptions of the sixth sense are never as concrete as those of the 5 physical senses. The reason for this is obvious. Our physical senses are used through all our waking hours. Our sixth sense seldom, if at all. The sixth sense works in us as feeling, not feeling sustained by emotion, but inner certainty as to a course of action, as to the development of coming events. Reason is not renounced altogether, nor logic nor knowledge, but all these are subordinated to intuition, and they are used only to bring into consciousness all aspects of a problem that needs to be solved. Intuition develops the solution, which emerges in the consciousness of the individual as a deep certainty that may have either visual or auditory manifestations, perhaps both. A man might list all elements of a problem confronting him. He might wrestle with the problem in terms of reason and logic, but he will draw no conclusion immediately. He will turn over the problem to his subconscious for a period of resolution, confident that the correct solution will be delivered to him. Frontiers of the mind. The enlightened man does not shut out one part of his nature in order to use another, but uses all he is, all the time, in all places, in each thing he does. Reason and logic and intuition become a unified tool for his coping with life. The sixth sense merges with the five material senses so as to convey to his consciousness a constant impression of both the inner world and the outer. Because he exists on all possible levels of consciousness, he is able to perceive things and events in their true nature and thereby to guide his own actions accordingly. He does not oppose events because he sees their inevitable direction, and he takes up his task within the moving stream of history as if he were directing it, when in point of fact he actually is playing the part best suited for him in that moving stream. The sixth sense brings to us impressions and convictions that are impossible to attribute to memory or experience. We are moved to conviction from out of the inexhaustible resource of universal mind, and we eventually become as positive in the reception of this feeling as we do to our senses of sight or touch or hearing. The Irish poet George Russell reports, "Once in an idle interval in my work, I sat with my face pressed in my hands, and in that dimness pictures began flickering in my brain. I saw a little dark shop, the counter before me, and behind it an old man fumbling with some papers, a man so old that his motions had lost swiftness and precision. Deeper in the store was a girl, red-haired with grey watchful eyes, fixed on the old man. I saw that to enter the shop one must take 2 steps downward from the cobbled pavement without. I questioned a young man, my office companion, who was then writing a letter, and I found that what I had seen was his father's shop. All my imaginations were not imaginations of mine in any true sense. For a while I was in a vacant mood. My companion had been thinking of his home, and his brain was populous with quickened memories, and they invaded my own mind. And when I made a question, I found their origin. But how many thousand times are we invaded by such images, and there is no speculation over them? The frontiers of mind and thought have barely been penetrated. Awaiting the human search of knowledge lies the most exciting, unexplored areas of all: human consciousness, mind, being, mentality. Our lives grow into images of those things which our minds are preoccupied with. And if we are concerned with bolts and nuts, we achieve a bolts and nuts mentality. And our very absorption by this infinitesimal slice of existence bars us from perception of the tremendous possibilities in other spiritual and mental realms. When a man puts intuition to work for him and closets himself with his consciousness in a searching effort to develop his sixth sense, he is bound not only to grow in effectiveness and power, but also as a questioning human soul in search of the utmost. Nothing in life is resolved simply by facts. Facts shriek of us because they appeal to our conscious mind, but facts that human knowledge has uncovered up to now are but the tiniest representation of the total sum of knowledge in universal mind. The rational, logical man who prides himself upon acting only on known facts is not nearly so rational as he would have himself believe. In point of actual fact, he is more often led to erroneous conclusions than true ones, not because he does not apply his reason and his logic and his knowledge, but because they are insufficient, deal only with a portion of existence, not its entirety. You shall know the hidden purpose. Each of us has a job, each has a row to hoe, and within our circumscribed tasks, problems constantly arise which we are called upon to solve, upon the solution of which our lives often depend. To apply the use of the sixth sense to the solution of these problems is possible to every man, regardless of how obsessed he is with the material world. Even if he will not strive for spiritual enlightenment, will not turn over his life to the divine for guidance, will not subordinate the ego by sacrifice, will not find within himself a longing for unity with the secret self, he still is not beyond the salvation offered by intuition. When his time of conscious striving with a problem is over, when he has considered all elements, pitted them against each other, weighed them, counted them, tabulated them, he then may visualize within his own mind a secret computing machine into which he can feed all elements of the problem and which will deliver him a true and accurate answer. Each of us, no matter how spiritually enlightened, can profit by this visualization. When your problem is upon you and you know as much about it as you ever possibly can, forget it completely. Envisage your secret computing machine, feed all elements of the problem into it. See them go in one by one until finally the whole problem is out of your hands. Know in your own heart that the problem will be solved, that you need do no more about it than act upon the solution when it is presented. Have no fear, the solution will come. It may be the following morning, perhaps the next afternoon, it may be a whole week, but it will illuminate your consciousness and you will know with the utmost certainty that the true answer has arrived. Once this highly significant experience has come to you, reason and logic and knowledge will have been dethroned as the principal activators of thought and action in your life, and enshrined in their stead will be that faculty of intuition that transcends and transfigures all situations and circumstances, because it is infinite and eternal and speaks to the individual from out of his sixth sense.